The jungle was silent, but its silence was thick with secrets. A strange, palpable tension hung in the air like a storm waiting to break, and the explorers who ventured deeper into its heart were unaware that the earth itself seemed to be watching them, waiting for them to take the next step. It was an ancient land, long forgotten, or so they thought. Yet something beckoned them, something that had been hidden for centuries, and now, as they stumbled upon it, the jungle seemed to hold its breath. Among them was Anna, a geographer with an insatiable thirst for discovery. She was the sort who believed in the power of the unknown, in the potential of places never seen before, and in the stories that the world whispered if you listened carefully enough. There was something about the vast wilderness that called to her, something that promised answers to questions no one had dared to ask. The expedition had been her idea. Her colleagues, a group of seasoned adventurers, had been sceptical at first, but Anna was persuasive. She had spent years studying ancient maps, decoding symbols from forgotten civilizations, and tracing patterns no one else could see. She was sure that the lost city, rumoured to be hidden deep in the jungle, was real. The expedition would be her legacy, an academic triumph that would put her name among the greats. Anna wasn't afraid of danger. She had spent much of her life navigating harsh terrains and unravelling mysteries that others had dismissed as mere myth. But what she didn't expect was the unsettling feeling that gripped her as they drew closer to their destination. The air felt heavier, the humidity thick with a strange, almost suffocating energy. And then there was the silence. Not the usual sounds of wildlife, the rustle of leaves or the distant call of birds, but an oppressive, unnatural stillness. They had arrived. The lost city was not what Anna had expected. She had imagined crumbling ruins, broken stone pillars, and weathered statues. Instead, what lay before them was a city that looked as though it had been preserved, untouched by time. Towering stone structures, intricately carved with symbols Anna had never seen before, stood proudly in the centre of the jungle. Vines clung to the walls, but they did not seem to detract from the city's grandeur. In fact, it was almost as though the jungle itself was protecting the city, hiding it from the world until the right moment. The explorers stepped cautiously onto the cobblestone streets, their footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness of the city. They had never seen anything like it. Anna's heart raced as she took in the sight before her. The architecture was unlike anything from their known history, and yet it felt strangely familiar, as though it had been waiting for them to find it. "Do you see this?" James, one of her colleagues, whispered, his voice filled with awe. He had always been the skeptic, the one who doubted every legend and every story, but even he could not deny the wonder of the place. "I see it," Anna replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes roamed over the carvings, studying the unfamiliar language etched into the walls. Something about the symbols sent a shiver down her spine. But what is it? What happened here? There was no answer, only the wind which had begun to stir, brushing against the ancient stones. As the team continued to explore, they discovered something that made them stop dead in their tracks, a large stone tablet at the centre of the city. It was covered in the same strange symbols that decorated the buildings, but this one was different. It seemed to pulse with an energy that was almost tangible. Anna could feel it in her bones, this subtle hum beneath her skin, urging her to come closer. She reached out, her fingers trembling as she touched the stone. The moment she did, the air around her seemed to shift. A low rumble echoed through the ground, and the jungle seemed to come alive with a sound Anna couldn't quite place. The wind picked up, swirling in every direction, and then, suddenly, everything went still again. Anna withdrew her hand, her heart pounding. "What just happened?" she asked, her voice trembling. James looked at her, his face pale. I don't know, but I don't like it. We need to leave." But it was too late. As they began to retreat, something extraordinary occurred. The first signs were subtle, tiny, almost imperceptible changes. Anna's fingers tingled, and her legs felt lighter as if a weight had been lifted. She glanced at James, who had stopped in his tracks, and let his eyes wide in disbelief. His face had softened, his expression younger, almost as though the lines of age were fading before her eyes. "James?" Anna asked, stepping closer. "Are you all right?" He turned to her slowly, his voice shaking. I feel strange. Something's happening. The others in the group began to notice it as well. One by one, their appearances began to change. Grey hairs disappeared, wrinkles smoothed away, and their movements grew more fluid, more youthful. It was as though time itself was reversing, the years slipping away from them with every passing moment. "No," Anna whispered, taking a step back. "This can't be real. It can't be happening." But it was. They were aging backward. The lost city, with all its strange otherworldly energy, had done something to them. The power of the place had begun to unravel time, and the explorers were helpless to stop it. As they fled the city, the effects became more pronounced. Anna's vision blurred, and she felt an odd sense of lightness, as though her very essence was being pulled into the past. The jungle around her seemed to warp, bending and twisting in impossible ways. The sense of dread grew stronger with each passing minute. "Do you feel it?" Anna asked, her voice panicked. We're not who we were. We're losing ourselves," James said, his voice unrecognizable, his body growing younger with every step. "But we can't go back. We have to find a way to stop it." The realization hit Anna like a punch to the gut. They had stumbled upon something ancient, something so powerful that it had the ability to reverse time. But what would it mean for them? And what else had they disturbed in their reckless pursuit of discovery? As the group ventured deeper into the jungle, unsure of what lay ahead, one thing was certain. Their journey had just begun, and the answers they sought might be far more dangerous than they ever imagined. And now there was no turning back. As Anna stumbled through the dense jungle, the weight of her mind was heavier than the very air around her. The reality of what had just happened to her and to all of them was sinking in, but it felt like a nightmare that no one could wake up from. She had felt the physical transformation, the loosening of her joints and the softening of her skin. But this was something beyond comprehension. Her colleagues, too, were no longer the same. They seemed smaller, more fragile, but also younger. James, who had once been the voice of skepticism in the group, looked almost childlike now. His once salt and pepper hair was darkening, and his face, so hardened by years of adventure, was softening with each step. His eyes, which had once carried the weight of experience, now shimmered with a youth he hadn't seen in decades. "Anna!" James said, his voice trembling, as if the change was slowly unravelling the person he had once been. "What do we do now?" Anna could barely answer. Her own hands were growing smoother, her body feeling lighter, and every step she took felt like the world was shifting beneath her feet. She wasn't sure if she was going mad or if this was truly happening, but the sounds of the jungle, the thickening shadows, and the strange, unspoken tension that now clung to their group made everything feel too real. "We need to get out of here," Anna said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We need to find answers. We can't stay here like this." But that's when it happened. The figure spoke again, and its voice was like a cold wind, whispering through the branches. "You cannot escape. Time is not what you think it is here. The city does not give, it takes." Anna felt a chill slide down her spine as the realization dawned on her. This city, this place, was not just a ruin, not just a forgotten civilization. It was a force. It was alive, and it had chosen them for something. The transformation, the youth they were experiencing, it wasn't a gift. It was a curse, a trap. "Run!" Anna finally screamed, her voice breaking as she turned, pushing through the fear and the confusion. Her body felt light, but she knew it wasn't just age that was shifting. Something darker was happening, something more dangerous. She couldn't allow the jungle to take them, not without answers. The others followed her, their bodies growing younger with every step, but their minds, now more fragile than ever, struggled to keep up. The deeper they ran into the jungle, the more Anna realized that there was no escape. No matter how fast they moved, the jungle seemed to follow them, its grasp tightening with every passing second. And the figure, it was still watching, waiting, as the city's curse began to unravel everything they thought they knew about time. But what would happen to them if they couldn't break the cycle? What if they were doomed to become part of the jungle's twisted age, forever trapped in the city's eternal loop? The answers were somewhere deep in the heart of the jungle. Anna had no choice but to find them. The jungle had become their enemy. Every step they took seemed to draw them further into its suffocating grasp. The explorers were no longer a team of confident, intrepid adventurers. They were survivors now. People pushed to their limits, unraveling as the days passed, becoming more fragile, more vulnerable with every passing hour. The transformation had taken root, creeping into their bodies, but it was the jungle itself that was the true threat. The thick canopy blocked out the sun, leaving the world beneath it in perpetual twilight. The air was oppressive, the humidity relentless, and the jungle seemed to come alive with every rustle of the leaves. Anna had always prided herself on being prepared, on being the one who had answers when others were uncertain. But now she felt lost. The city, the curse, the figure, they had all thrown her into a place she didn't understand. And the deeper they went into the jungle, the more dangerous it became. The once innocent hum of the jungle, the soft rustling of leaves, was now filled with an ominous energy that made Anna's skin crawl. "Anna, we need to stop," James said, his voice hoarse, almost childlike now, his transformation more advanced than the others. "We can't keep going like this. I can't. Think straight." Anna turned to look at him, her heart sinking. The man she had once seen as a steady, grounded force was now a shadow of himself. His face was growing younger, but his mind was unraveling. "I know," Anna said quietly. She took a deep breath, her mind racing. The jungle wasn't just changing them physically, it was doing something to their minds too. There was a fog in the air, a cloud that made everything seem distant, disjointed. She had to keep them moving, but the weight of their situation pressed on her chest, making it hard to breathe. But they couldn't stop now. They had to find a way out, had to understand what the city wanted from them. Ahead, Sarah staggered, her face twisted with panic. I can't feel my legs. It's like the ground is shifting beneath me, like I'm sinking." Anna rushed to her side, catching her before she fell. "Stay with me, Sarah. Stay focused." Anna's voice was sharp, urgent. "We need to keep moving. We need to find shelter. We can't let this place swallow us whole." Sarah nodded weakly, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. She was no longer the strong, determined botanist who had joined this expedition. She was a scared, lost soul, just like the rest of them. As they continued through the jungle, the ground beneath them seemed to grow more unstable. The earth cracked and groaned as if protesting their every step. Giant trees began to sway, their roots snapping out of the soil and coiling around the explorers' legs. The vines stretched like serpents, curling toward them with a hunger that was almost palpable. Anna had no idea if it was the jungle itself attacking them, or if it was just their minds playing tricks. But the fear that gnawed at her was real. Suddenly a low growl echoed through the trees. The noise was so deep, so guttural that Anna froze. Her heart skipped a beat, her breath shallow. It wasn't a sound she recognized, it was something primal, something terrifying. "Get back!" Anna shouted, pulling Sarah closer as the ground seemed to tremble underfoot. "Stay close. Do not move." James, his eyes wide with confusion, looked around frantically. "What is that noise? What's happening?" Before anyone could answer, the growl came again, closer this time, followed by the unmistakable sound of something large moving through the brush. Anna's instincts screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere to run. The jungle was alive, and it was closing in. A massive shape emerged from the underbrush, its eyes glowing a fierce yellow. It was a creature, something Anna couldn't even begin to identify. Its body was covered in thick fur, its teeth glinting like knives in the dim light. It growled again, a sound that rattled Anna's bones, and then it lunged. In an instant, the creature was upon them. James screamed as it swiped at him, knocking him to the ground. Anna's heart pounded in her chest as she rushed forward, but Sarah, her legs still too weak to support her, tripped and fell. The creature turned toward her, its eyes locked onto her with an almost predatory focus. "Sarah!" Anna screamed, but she was too far away. Desperation clawed at her chest as she reached for anything that might save them. Without thinking, Anna grabbed a sharp rock from the ground and threw it at the creature with all her might. It hit the creature's side, but it didn't slow it down. Instead it turned, eyes blazing with fury. But then, a crackling sound filled the air. The jungle seemed to shift again, and the creature suddenly stopped, its growl turning into a low, confused sound. It took a step back, its gaze flickering toward the trees behind them. "What's going on?" Sarah gasped, her voice hoarse as she struggled to rise to her feet. Her legs still felt like jelly, but she managed to crawl to Anna's side. The creature growled once more, but it didn't attack. It stood there, its eyes still locked onto the explorers, but now there was something strange in the air. The atmosphere seemed to change, as if the jungle itself was breathing in sync with them. The vines stopped moving, the trees ceased their groaning, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Then the figure, the wraith, emerged from the shadows. Anna's breath caught in her throat as the figure stepped forward, its glowing eyes fixed on the creature. The jungle seemed to recoil, the ground shaking as though the land itself was trying to escape the entity's presence. The creature hesitated, and then, without a sound, it retreated into the underbrush, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. The figure turned toward Anna, its face an expressionless void. It didn't speak, but Anna could feel its presence pressing in on her like a weight. She knew that the jungle had orchestrated this encounter. It had allowed the creature to come, to test them, and now it was allowing them to survive. "Why?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Why did it leave?" The figure didn't answer. Instead, it turned and began to walk back toward the heart of the jungle, as if beckoning them to follow. "Do you think we can trust it?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Anna didn't answer at first. The figure, this shadow in the jungle, was both an ally and an enemy. It was guiding them, but to what end? What were they walking toward? But there was no choice. They had to follow. With every step, the jungle grew darker, more twisted. The figure led them deeper into the unknown, and Anna knew they were no closer to escape, but they had no choice now. They had to find the answers. The stakes had never been higher. And the jungle had made it clear that it was watching, waiting. The figure moved ahead with an eerie, purposeful stride, and Anna found herself inexplicably following. The others, James, Sarah, staggered behind her, their bodies still shrinking in size, as if they were trapped in the relentless cycle of regressing backward in age. Each step they took seemed to undo the very nature of who they had been. But even as their physicality weakened, their minds remained sharp, focused on the one thing they needed to understand. What did the city want from them? And how could they stop the curse before it consumed them entirely? The air thickened as they entered deeper into the jungle. The sounds of the forest had changed again, the usual rustling of the leaves now replaced by a strange, low hum. Anna felt a shiver crawl up her spine. The tension was unbearable, and yet they had no choice but to move forward. The figure halted in front of an ancient stone archway, massive, carved with symbols they couldn't decipher, yet undeniably ominous. Beyond it the city lay, or what was left of it. "Is this it?" James whispered, his voice filled with awe, though his face looked younger now, like a lost child. "Is this where it all began?" Anna didn't answer. Instead, she reached forward, her hand trembling as it brushed against the cool stone. She could feel the energy of the place, a pulse that hummed just beneath her fingertips. It felt like the city itself was alive, aware of their presence, as if it had been waiting for them to arrive, just as the figure had said. "It's not too late to leave, Anna." Sarah's voice cracked behind her, desperate. "Please, we can still go back. This place, it's too much. I can feel it pulling at my mind. We need to get out before it's too late." Anna turned, seeing the pleading look in Sarah's eyes. She wanted to believe her. She wanted to run and never look back. But a part of her, the part that had always been driven, always been curious, felt a pull toward the unknown, a need to understand what had happened here. Why had they been chosen? Why was their age regressing, and why was the jungle so intent on claiming them? The figure, now waiting silently near the entrance, tilted its head, as though it were aware of their hesitation. "You cannot escape," it said, its voice echoing in the silence. "The city will not let you go. It needs you. It has claimed you." "What do you want from us?" Anna shouted, her voice shaking with both anger and fear. The emotions were a whirlwind inside her, but she couldn't afford to be paralyzed by them. She had to act. She had to make a choice. The figure's glowing eyes regarded her for a moment before it spoke again. "You will understand soon enough. The city demands a sacrifice. Only then will you be free." A sacrifice. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled again, this time violently. The air itself seemed to bend, the pressure increasing as if the very fabric of reality was cracking. The city, ancient and powerful, was waking up. The jungle around them seemed to shudder with life, the trees groaning and creaking as if something deep within the earth was stirring. The stone archway before them began to glow, faint lines of light tracing across the stone like veins of energy, pulling them toward it. "Anna!" Sarah screamed. "We have to go, now!" But Anna didn't move. She couldn't. The city had chosen them, and whatever sacrifice it demanded, it had to be faced. She understood now there was no running from this. The jungle wasn't just a physical threat. It was an entity, a being that existed beyond time, beyond understanding. It was more than just a place. It was a force. "I'm not leaving," Anna said, her voice firm. She turned back to face the figure. "What is the sacrifice? What do you want from us?" The figure's eyes flickered with a strange sadness before it spoke once more, its voice almost pitying. "The sacrifice is not one of blood," it said. "It is one of time. You must give up your past to break free. You must let go of who you were and embrace the youth that has been gifted to you. Only then will the curse be lifted. But know this, you cannot go back. Time will erase all that you have known, and you will be forever lost to the city. It will take your memories, your experiences. It will make you forget." Anna's heart raced as the weight of its words settled in. The choice was clear. They could accept the city's offer, regress to nothing more than children, with no memories of their past lives, no knowledge of who they were before, or they could continue to fight against it, but the price would be their minds and eventually their lives. A deep breath escaped her as the truth hit her like a tidal wave. If she chose to accept, she would be letting go of everything, her career, her ambition, her family, everything. But if she refused, if they refused, the jungle would consume them. It would continue to age them backward until they were nothing but dust. "Anna, don't!" James's voice was desperate, pleading. His transformation had gone the furthest. He looked more like a child than a man now, his features soft and innocent, his eyes wide with terror. "We can't do this. We can't let it take us. We have to fight back." But Anna shook her head. She felt the weight of the choice in her chest, and deep down she knew there was only one way forward. The jungle wouldn't stop. The city wouldn't stop. They had to let go of everything. Without another word, she stepped forward, placing her hand on the stone archway. The energy in the air surged, filling her with a strange sensation, both terrifying and exhilarating. Her skin seemed to tingle, her body feeling lighter, almost weightless. The jungle's oppressive presence around them began to recede, and for a moment Anna thought she had made the right decision. But then the figure moved forward, its glowing eyes locking onto hers, and Anna's pulse quickened. It had been watching them all along, waiting for her to make this decision, and now it seemed pleased. "You have chosen," the figure said, its voice full of finality. "You will forget. You will become part of the city, and the city will become part of you." As Anna's world blurred around her, the jungle seemed to exhale, the tension lifting. She had chosen, and the consequences of that choice would follow her for the rest of her new, unremembered life. But even as her mind began to fade, as her past was slowly stripped away, Anna couldn't help but wonder if there was a way to hold on, if she could remember the things that had brought her here, if she could fight to preserve the person she had been. Because in the end, the true sacrifice was never just forgetting. It was becoming something new, something unrecognizable. And Anna wasn't sure she was ready to let go. Anna's vision was blurry, the colours of the jungle blending together like a surreal painting. It felt as though time itself had stopped moving. Her body felt light, as though her very being was dissolving into the air, becoming part of the strange city. The memory of who she had been, the life she'd lived, was slipping through her fingers like sand. But just before everything around her faded to nothingness, a voice, familiar yet distant, broke through the fog. "Anna, no!" It was Sarah's voice. Desperation and fear laced every word, and it was enough to shake Anna from the trance-like state she had been in. For a moment her mind cleared and she stood frozen in place, heart racing. The figure who had guided them stood silently, its glowing eyes unwavering. Anna felt the weight of its presence, but she forced herself to focus on Sarah's voice, on the urgency behind it. "Anna!" Sarah shouted again. "You can't just forget. You've always had a choice. You can fight this." Fight this. The words rang in Anna's ears, and she clung to them as if they were her only lifeline. She had been so close to giving in, so close to letting go of everything. But Sarah's plea reminded her of the most fundamental truth. She was more than just this city, more than just this jungle. She couldn't let it erase her life, her choices. With renewed determination, Anna pushed her palm harder against the stone archway, feeling the pulse of the city beneath her hand. The energy was overwhelming, yet she resisted. She had to break free. "No!" she cried, her voice shaking as she willed herself to remember who she had been and who she was. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the hum of the city began to waver. The energy around her seemed to flicker like a flame that was struggling to stay alight. She felt her age reverse, but only for a fleeting moment. It wasn't enough. She wasn't just going to be a child again. She wasn't going to forget who she was. With all the strength she had left, Anna jerked her hand away from the archway, stumbling back as though the city itself had rejected her. Her body felt unsteady, her legs uncooperative, but she stood tall, facing the jungle, facing the future. Her skin tingled, but she fought against the sensation, focusing on her surroundings. The figure stood still, its expression unreadable. Anna's heart raced as she looked over at Sarah and James, who were now no longer regressing in age. They were still younger, but they weren't being consumed by the city's curse any longer. "Anna, you did it," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. "You stopped it." But even as Sarah spoke, Anna felt a deep sadness take root. The city had taken something from them, something irreplaceable. James, his eyes wide and full of childlike wonder, looked over at the archway. He no longer seemed the man he once was, but in that moment, he was still there, still fighting alongside them. Anna knew they would never be the same. She would never be the same. "Are we free?" James asked, his voice full of confusion, as though he was struggling to grasp the weight of what had happened. His face was younger than it had ever been, but his mind, his essence, remained the same. "We're not free yet," Anna replied, the words heavy on her lips, "but we're closer. We've made it this far." The figure before them shifted, a long, sighing exhale coming from it as if it were mourning their decision. "You have chosen," it said quietly, its voice hollow and resigned. "You have chosen to fight against your fate." Anna stood firm, refusing to allow the sorrow in the figure's voice to sway her. "We don't belong to you," she said, her voice steady, yet filled with emotion. "We'll find our way out, and we won't let you take any more from us." For a moment the figure's gaze softened, as if it were understanding something it hadn't before. Then, slowly, it stepped back, vanishing into the shadows of the jungle, its presence fading like a nightmare slipping away with the dawn. Anna exhaled a shaky breath. The weight of the decision was still there, lingering, but they had done it. The curse had been broken. They weren't free, but they had stopped the worst of it. Now they had a chance to rebuild, to reclaim what they had lost. As the jungle began to settle, the unnatural hum that had filled the air faded, leaving behind an eerie silence. Anna turned to Sarah and James, seeing the reflection of hope in their eyes, a flicker that had almost been extinguished. They had each lost something precious, but they had gained something too, the strength to fight back. "Where do we go from here?" Sarah asked, her voice low, hesitant. Anna glanced at the horizon. The jungle had never seemed so vast, so filled with both danger and opportunity. They had survived, but the world had changed, and so had they. "We go forward," Anna said, her voice unwavering. "We take what we've learned and we keep moving. We can't forget, not now." James nodded, though he still seemed lost in the confusion of his own transformation. He had a long way to go to rediscover who he was and who they all were now. But there was time. The city that had once seemed so impenetrable now lay behind them, its influence fading with every step they took away from it. The jungle might still hold secrets, but it no longer held them captive. They had broken free. "Let's keep moving," Anna said, her gaze firm as she led the way forward. And as they walked, the jungle, once an enemy, became a landscape of endless possibilities. They had chosen to keep their memories, to hold on to their past, and with that choice they reclaimed their futures. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time since they had entered this cursed place, Anna felt the weight on her shoulders ease. The journey was far from over, but it was theirs to shape. They had chosen to live, and that was enough. Anna, Sarah, and James moved steadily through the jungle, their bodies still adjusting to the strange transformations they had undergone. The city they had left behind, so full of mysteries, so full of life, was now just a distant memory, fading like a dream. The jungle around them seemed more alive than ever, but it was no longer a cage. They were free, though the road ahead was still unclear. They had chosen to leave to escape the grip of the city, but what did that mean now? They no longer felt the weight of the oppressive force that had kept them captive, but they also had no clear direction. The jungle stretched out in every direction, vast and unyielding. Their path was uncertain. "We're not out of the woods yet," Sarah said quietly, her voice breaking the silence that had settled between them. She brushed a strand of hair from her face, her eyes scanning the dense foliage around them. "But we're getting closer. I can feel it." Anna nodded, glancing at James, who walked beside her. His eyes were wide, still trying to understand the enormity of what had happened. His mind was clearly working overtime, piecing together fragments of his past, trying to make sense of everything he had lost and regained. She could see the confusion and frustration on his face, but there was something else too, something stronger. Hope. The kind of hope that only comes after surviving something that should have broken you. Anna took a deep breath, the air thick with humidity and the scent of damp earth. It was strange how the jungle could feel so alive and so suffocating at the same time. She had always been afraid of it, of the unknown that lurked in its shadows. But now, after everything they had been through, it seemed less like a threat and more like a challenge. They continued walking in silence, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the dense underbrush. As the hours passed, the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the path. They had no clear goal, no map to follow. But Anna wasn't worried. For the first time since they had entered the jungle, she didn't feel lost. James spoke up after a while, his voice soft but steady. "Do you think we'll ever really leave this place?" Anna looked at him, her heart heavy with the weight of the question. She didn't know the answer, but she knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. "We don't have to leave everything behind," she said softly. "We just need to find our way forward." Sarah nodded in agreement. "It's the journey, not the destination. We've already come this far. We've fought through the worst of it. We'll find a way out eventually." There was a pause, as if the words themselves were giving them the strength to keep moving forward. Anna could feel the tension lifting from her shoulders, the uncertainty melting away. They had already survived the worst, hadn't they? The jungle might still hold mysteries and dangers, but it could never hold them captive again. As the day drew to a close, they found a small clearing, bathed in the soft light of the setting sun. Anna sank to the ground, exhaustion creeping into her bones. Sarah sat beside her, and James joined them a moment later. The three of them sat in silence for a long time, taking in the beauty of the world around them. It was a moment of peace, a moment they hadn't expected to have. Anna felt a deep sense of gratitude well up inside her. She had come so close to losing everything, her past, her identity, her very self. But now, in this moment of stillness, she realized that she had gained something much more important, her strength. The strength to choose. The strength to fight for the life she wanted, even when it seemed impossible. "We made it through," Anna said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice was quiet, but there was a strength in it that hadn't been there before. "I didn't think we would. I didn't think I could, but we did." Sarah smiled, her eyes soft with understanding. "We've always been strong. We just needed to remember that." Anna looked at James, who was staring up at the sky, his expression thoughtful. He had changed so much over the past days, but now, sitting there with them, he seemed at peace. "What about you?" Anna asked gently. "How do you feel?" James turned to her, his eyes a little more focused, a little less lost than before. "I'm not sure," he admitted, "but I feel different, like I'm remembering who I am and who I was meant to be." Anna smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She understood exactly what he meant. They had all been through so much, but they had come out the other side stronger for it. They had faced their fears, their losses, and their uncertainties, and they had survived. They hadn't just learned how to survive in the jungle, they had learned how to survive each other. The sun had dipped below the horizon now, and the jungle around them began to come alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures. Anna felt a sense of calm settle over her, a sense that they were on the right path. They didn't know where it would lead, but they would face it together. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, Sarah said, breaking the silence again. We'll keep moving. We'll find a way out. We'll make it home. Anna nodded, her heart full. They had lost so much, but they had gained so much more. They had each other. They had their will to survive. And most importantly, they had the courage to face whatever came next. They sat there for a while longer, watching the stars emerge in the sky above them, one by one. There was no clear path, no destination in sight. But Anna knew that wherever they went, whatever came next, they would face it with the strength they had found within themselves. They had already survived the hardest part. They had chosen to live. And that was enough.